The suns over Kelvar 9 didn't shine. They glared. Twin orbs of brutal heat baked the rust-colored sands into glassy patches that could sear flesh from bone. Across the Colosseum's domed roof, refracted light danced like drunken ghosts, distorted further by the shimmering hum of the energy shield that contained both combatants and consequences. In the center pit, a man stood with his hands on his knees, panting, not kneeling, not broken, just thinking very seriously about whether he could stay upright another 30 seconds without vomiting. Jace Devrin, Terran by birth, idiot by choice, hadn't exactly planned to be here. A few bad decisions, a few misunderstood shipping manifests, which happened to contain illegal plasma cores, and one suspiciously talkative fungus. And a bar fight with a three-eyed customs officer had landed him in the Galactic penal system's equivalent of community theater, except with more stabbing. His opponent, now twitching in the sand 10 paces away, had been a 7-foot reptilian mercenary with a vibro axe and a personality like a tax audit. Jace, as per usual, had no weapons, no armor, and no formal training unless you counted growing up in an asteroid colony where knife dodgeball was a recess activity. But somehow, through grit, sheer stubbornness, and a well-timed insult about the lizard's mother, he'd won. The crowd above was a pulsing tide of cheers, clicks, and strange squelching noises that passed for applause among some of the more gelatinous species. Drone cameras zipped around the arena, broadcasting Jace's image across half the spiral arm. He lifted one hand in a tired, sarcastic wave and muttered, "Thank you. Thank you. Please hold your adoration until I'm done bleeding." Up in the royal box, hovering above the stadium like a floating palace carved from obsidian, a woman watched him in silence. General Varela of the Vylari Dominion didn't smile. Her people considered expressions a weakness. Smiling implied joy. Joy implied vulnerability. Vulnerability implied you weren't genetically engineered for orbital warfare. But she couldn't help the faint flicker of amusement that crept into her pale eyes. He was ridiculous. The human stood no taller than her shoulder, with a lean build that suggested he fought not because he was powerful, but because no one ever told him he shouldn't. His face was smeared with blood, some his, some borrowed, and his brown hair was plastered to his skull with sweat. He looked like a man who'd argued with a meat grinder and won on a technicality, and yet he moved like someone who had something more dangerous than strength. Nothing left to lose. "Who is he?" Virella asked without turning. Her adjutant, a hunched creature with 6 arms and the voice of a malfunctioning translator, chirped and tapped on a datapad. "Prisoner 847 Zeta, former Marine, multiple desertions, smuggling, sabotage, tax evasion, destruction of property, loitering, jaywalking, though we're not entirely sure what that last one is." "Terran?" "Yes, General." Varela studied him for a moment longer. Then, with all the solemn gravity of a fleet commander issuing a planetary bombardment order, she said, "I wish you were my husband." Her entourage blinked in unison, like a computer buffering. One aide dropped a datapad, another coughed, then tried to make it sound like it wasn't a laugh. "Ma'am?" "I said what I said." Down in the arena, Jace had collapsed onto his back, staring up at the twin suns like he was trying to make eye contact with God and lodge a complaint. His chest heaved, his hands were scraped raw, and something in his right ankle was definitely not aligned the way nature intended. Still, he heard the announcement when it came through the arena speakers. "Victor, prisoner 847 Zeta, by order of the Dominion, you are granted rest and reward. You will be summoned again soon." "Fantastic," he muttered. "Can't wait." He sat up slowly, dusted sand from his scalp, and made a show of waving to the crowd again. "Love you too, you beautiful, bloodthirsty psychopaths." He was escorted away by 2 robotic guards that looked like vending machines with legs. As they clanked down the corridor, Jace limped between them, muttering curses in 3 languages and asking if there would be snacks. There were not. Varela remained seated as the next match was prepared, some minor scuffle between insectoid diplomats and an artificial intelligence with mood issues. Her mind, however, stayed with the human. Later that evening, in her private chambers aboard the dreadnought Sovereign Light, she reviewed footage of the match. Again and again. She zoomed in on his expression as he dodged, weaved, threw punches that should have broken his fingers, laughed in the face of someone twice his size. "Why does this one fight like that?" she asked the room. No one answered. The walls didn't talk. That was last month's AI glitch. She rewound the video, stopped, played, froze it again. "Because," she said to herself, "he's either brave or stupid." Pause. Or both. And she found herself smiling again. Down in the holding cells, Jace lay on a narrow bunk with a rag over his eyes and a sore spot in his ribs that throbbed like a hyperspace engine with indigestion. He thought about his opponent, the crowd, and the strange moment when the big screen had flashed an image of the woman watching him. Tall, regal, eyes sharp enough to slice tungsten. He'd felt something when she looked at him. Not fear, not even awe. More like, huh. And then, with a weary smirk that tugged at the bruises on his face, he mumbled, "Wouldn't that be hilarious?" He didn't know what that was. Not yet. But the galaxy had just begun spinning a little faster. And somewhere, deep in the databanks of the Dominion's war archives, a file was opened and labeled. Potential candidate for union. Species, human. Status, improbable. Likelihood of survival, less than 2%. Reason for selection, unknown. Possibly humorous. And for the first time in decades, the war machine of the Vilary Dominion shuddered. Not in fear, but in curiosity. The cell was different. For starters, it didn't smell like armpits and regret. That alone set off every alarm bell in Jace's battle-worn brain. The walls were smooth alloy, softly lit with ambient glow panels that didn't flicker ominously. There was a bed, real mattress, not stone slab. A sink with water that didn't hiss, and a screen on the wall quietly cycling through alien landscapes with suspicious tranquility. He sat on the edge of the bed, one eyebrow twitching upward like it was trying to escape the rest of his face. "Well," he said aloud to no one in particular, "either I'm dead or I've been adopted by someone with very specific taste in human furniture." A chirp answered him, a small orb, a floating assistant drone with 4 mechanical limbs and the voice of a cheery librarian, descended from the ceiling. "Greetings, 847 Zeta. Welcome to Holding Unit Prestige 2. You have been reassigned pending further instructions." Jace blinked. "Prestige 2? That's not a prison cell designation. That's a shampoo level." The orb whirred. "You have been elevated in status due to performance in the arena. Your resilience rating has reached 86%, a record for unmodified organics." "Great," Jace muttered, flexing his bruised hand. "Can't wait to put that on my resume. Right under accidental explosives expert." The door to the cell, no, suite, he guessed, opened with a pleasant hiss, and 2 Dominion officers entered. Both wore ceremonial armor polished to a mirror sheen, their faces impassive. One of them looked at Jace like he might be contagious. "You are summoned," she said. "Summoned, right. Just like a fantasy novel, only with more metal pants." Jace stood slowly, groaning like a man who had been on the wrong end of several large claws recently. "Lead the way, Sparkles." They led him down a corridor that felt more like the lobby of an expensive spa than a detention center. The walls were lined with bioluminescent vines, suspended in transparent nutrient gel, and the floor was some kind of soft yet firm material that made his boots squeak in protest. Jace couldn't decide if he should be impressed or deeply suspicious. Then they arrived at a door flanked by 2 guards who looked carved from nightmares and possibly granite. The door hissed open to reveal a room that was not a room. It was a garden. At least his brain tried to categorize it that way. Floating orbs of light drifted through humid air, thick with alien pollen. Massive blossoms opened and closed in rhythm with a low, resonating hum. A narrow stream of silver water ran in loops across a perfectly manicured moss floor. And at the center, on a hovering platform that might have been a throne or a really extravagant recliner, sat General Varela. She was out of her armor. That was the first thing he noticed, mostly because he had no idea how she still looked like she could beat him to death with a flower petal. She wore something flowing and iridescent that shifted color with her movements, like a piece of night sky caught in motion. Her long ears were unadorned, swept back, almost feline in their twitching. You survived, she said, as if mildly surprised the sun had risen. Disappointed? Jace replied, standing at the garden's edge like a schoolboy, unsure whether he was about to be praised or vaporized. She gestured, and a seat unfolded from the air beside her. Literally unfolded. From the air. Like some invisible seam tore open and spat out furniture. Sit. Of course. Chairs that appear from nowhere. That's completely normal. I am deeply calm about this. He sat. She studied him for several long seconds. Jace fidgeted. Finally, she said, "You fight like a madman. I get that a lot. You are not trained. Your footwork is poor. Your balance is improvisational at best. Your technique borders on accidental genius. Technically, I am an accident, so that tracks." She ignored the joke, but her ears twitched again. Jace wasn't sure if that was amusement or the Vylari equivalent of an eye roll. Yet you won. You defeat opponents with better armor, superior weapons, enhanced muscle fiber. I've always said muscles are overrated. It's what's inside the skull that counts. She tilted her head slightly. Cranial impact tolerance? Number sarcasm. This time she didn't just twitch. Her lips actually curved. It was not quite a smile, more like the kind of expression someone made when they were trying not to laugh during a funeral. I have a proposition, she said at last. I already don't like it. You will fight with me. Definitely don't like it. One match, joint demonstration, for the Imperial Gala. You and I against a chosen set of opponents. If you perform well, I will see to it that your sentence is commuted. You will leave as a free man. Ah, so freedom in exchange for public violence. That's not morally complicated at all. I could return you to the base cells. You would likely survive another 2 matches. Statistically speaking. Statistically speaking, this is how most of my relationships have started, Jace said, rubbing his jaw. All right, fine. I'll be your +1 to the Royal Slaughter Ball, but I have one condition. She raised a single silver eyebrow. You are in no position to demand conditions. True, still, I want you to answer one question. Proceed. Jace leaned forward, grinning just enough to be irritating. Did you really say you wished I was your husband? The silence that followed was the kind that should have been fatal. Then she said, voice cool as a glacier on Pluto. I did. It was a joke. Oh, so the terrifying alien general does have a sense of humor. Do not make the mistake of assuming humor equates to leniency. Oh, don't worry. I'd rather take a punch than a proposal anyway. Her ears twitched again. The conversation ended with the faintest suggestion of mutual amusement, just enough to shift the air. They stood. She nodded once, and the same folding space door unzipped itself open. As Jace left, he whispered under his breath, "This is going to end so badly." Behind him, Varela watched the retreating Terran, and without smiling spoke to herself. Maybe. The vines rustled, the air shimmered, and above them both, the stars turned. The training chamber pulsed like the inside of a mechanical beast's lung. Walls shifting gently to adjust gravity, floor plates rearranging like a puzzle that disliked being solved. Jace Devrin stood at the center, squinting up at a ceiling he was pretty sure had just sighted him. "This place is alive, isn't it?" he asked the empty air. "It's going to eat me if I insult it, right?" The only response was the soft chime of the chamber stabilizing its gravitational vectors. He took a cautious step, then another, and promptly fell on his rear when the floor rotated 30 degrees without warning. Okay, so the floor is judging me. Noted. General Varela stepped into the chamber, her bare feet making no sound on the polished alloy. Her training armor was matte black with subtle silver etchings, less intimidating than her warplate, but no less imposing. Her long ears twitched once at the sight of Jace sprawled on the ground, limbs askew like someone had tried to fold him for shipping, and failed. "You are not yet calibrated." "I'm very calibrated," he grunted, trying to stand. "I'm calibrated for chairs, beds, mild walking, possibly snacks. Not 0-point acrobatics on a grudge-holding trampoline." She extended a hand. He looked at it for a second as if expecting it to bite him, then took it. She pulled him up with the kind of strength that didn't show off. It just was. "We begin with posture," she said, stepping back and raising her arms in a flowing stance that looked suspiciously like space ballet, but with the promise of bruises. "We begin with coffee," he countered. "Then we can posture all you like. You must match me." "Lady, I've spent most of my life avoiding people who said that sentence." She didn't blink. "Right. Copying. Okay, let's see. One leg here, arm out. Is this the please don't vaporize me position?" She stepped forward and adjusted his stance with the precision of a surgeon. Hands, hips, shoulders. He didn't say a word until she took a step back again. "You touch my rib. You know I'm ticklish there. You must conquer your body's weaknesses. Not if they're fun weaknesses." She moved again, this time without words, fluid as oil on water. Jace mirrored her as best he could, less graceful and more drunken hovercraft. He stumbled, corrected, caught himself in a crouch that made something pop in his back. "Was that me or the floor?" She didn't answer. She launched at him. Not a real attack, more like a test, a blur of limbs in motion. He ducked instinctively, rolled, came up in a low stance he hadn't consciously chosen. "Reflexes," she said, circling. "Unrefined. Useful. I call it panic art." Their sparring began in earnest. She was clearly holding back, her strikes controlled, movements slower than he suspected they could be. But even held back, she was relentless. He moved like a man who had fought not in arenas, but in alleys, backlots, ship corridors during reactor malfunctions. Desperate, adaptive, dirty. He threw sand once. The chamber had no sand. He mimed it. She paused. "Did you just pretend to throw sand in my face?" "It's the idea of sand. Psychological warfare." "You are the most irritating opponent I have encountered." "I try." After an hour of movement, dodges, blows that stopped just shy of bone, and one ill-advised joke about her ears being excellent for listening to reasons not to punch me, they stopped. She handed him a towel. He wiped his face. "You're improving," she said like it was a punishment. "I always do better after someone threatens my life for fun." The chamber doors opened and a Dominion aide entered, looking like she'd walked into the wrong end of a thunderstorm. "General," she said, voice tight, "your presence is required. The Emperor's Logistics Board has questions regarding your request to include a human in the gala." "Of course they do," Jace muttered, "because nothing says elite intergalactic diplomacy like inviting a scruffy Terran with anger issues and a decent left hook." Varela looked at him. Her voice was flat. "Remain here. Do not touch anything." "I never touch anything unless I absolutely—" The door closed. 10 seconds later, Jace was poking a control panel shaped like a glowing jellyfish. "Don't touch anything," he mimicked in a high voice. "Like that's ever worked." The jellyfish blinked, then launched a hologram into the air, 6 Dominion soldiers fighting what appeared to be a giant cube with legs. Jace sat cross-legged and watched, muttering, "Wow, that cube's got moves." Varela returned 20 minutes later to find the lights dimmed, music playing. At least one of the settings was labeled Emotional Melancholy of the Conquered, and Jace miming a dramatic speech to the training drone. "We who are about to die demand slightly better cafeteria options," he declared. She stood in the doorway. "You were instructed not to touch anything." "Technically, I touched everything, which averages out to the same result." She sighed. It wasn't an angry sigh. It was the sigh of a woman who had led fleets into battle, survived 6 assassination attempts, and now realized her most dangerous challenge was trying to keep a human from emotionally bonding with the furniture. "You are impossible." "I get that a lot." "We leave tomorrow. There will be no simulation. The gala match is real. Your opponents will be enhanced, cybernetically and genetically." "Fantastic," Jace said, standing and stretching. "So we're fighting a science experiment's greatest hits album." "Got it." "You will wear armor." "Do I get a cape?" "I feel like I need a cape." "Very dramatic." "I will see to it personally." He grinned. "You like me?" "I tolerate you. For now." "Which in your culture is basically foreplay." She turned, ears twitching, and as they walked down the corridor together, metal panels humming with unseen energy, stars burning silently beyond the hull. Jace leaned in slightly and whispered, "Admit it, you've never been this entertained during a war plan." And she, without looking at him, replied, "War's end." "You don't." The shuttle that brought them to the Imperial Gala was the kind that made silence sound expensive. Every surface inside gleamed with a subtle sheen like light had been trained to behave. Jace sat with one leg over the other, fiddling with a gauntlet that didn't quite fit, while Varela stood near the viewport, hands clasped behind her back, watching the golden rings of Halas V orbit lazily below. "So," Jace said, flexing the gauntlet again, "I'm guessing there's no chance we're just attending as guests? A nice dinner, maybe a quiet award ceremony?" Varela didn't turn. "This is not a dinner. It is an exhibition of strength." "Ah, and nothing says strength like bringing the guy who punched a robot and broke his own hand." She finally turned to face him, her voice dry. "Do not underestimate your usefulness. You provide a narrative. You mean comic relief. I mean unpredictability. The aristocracy is trained to expect the expected. You are the opposite. I accept that. I also accept hazard pay, just putting that out there." The shuttle docked with a gentle hum, the kind of precision that only came from computers, flying machines so advanced they made Terran spaceports look like duct tape museums. The doors opened with a sigh, and the two of them stepped out into a world that looked designed by someone with a vendetta against minimalism. The Imperial Hall of Might and Diplomacy, which Jace decided was an oxymoron just waiting to explode, stretched for kilometers, its ceiling lost in the shimmer of atmosphere fields. Flags from 1,000 worlds floated midair, held aloft by gravitic pulses. Holograms drifted between columns like gossip given shape. Music that sounded like it had been composed by a sentient asteroid rolled through the space like thunder and silk. "Are we expected to mingle?" Jace asked as they passed a being made entirely of feathers and static electricity. "Briefly," Virella replied. "The match begins in 1 hour. Until then, remain diplomatic." "I'll do my best." "You said that last time. It ended with 3 arrests and a jellyfish embargo. They insulted Earth Pizza. I had no choice." They approached a gathering of officials, each one draped in ceremonial garb that defied physics or taste. Among them stood an ambassador from the Korak Combine, a cybernetic eel wearing a translator medallion and several rings on what Jace hoped were fingers. "This is him?" the eel asked, voice filtered through the medallion like someone gargling a radio. "This is the human you brought?" Jace stepped forward, extended a hand, then paused. "Do I shake your upper fin, or is that rude?" The eel blinked, or maybe sneezed, and slithered backward. "It speaks." "Oh, I do more than that. I also dodge, punch, and ask inappropriate questions under stress." Varela moved smoothly between them, her voice level. "This is Deveron. He has proven himself repeatedly in the Dominion's arenas. A pity you've lowered your standards." Jace smiled. "And I see yours are still buried somewhere under 4 layers of smug." Virella didn't react, but Jace could have sworn he saw the faintest flick of amusement cross her face. Before the eel could respond with something insulting and/or slimy, a chime rang out across the hall. "Combatants," said a voice that sounded like a galaxy humming, "report to the Arena of Accord." The Arena of Accord turned out to be a shimmering disk suspended in open air, surrounded by floating platforms, where delegates reclined on force field couches. Above them hung planetary emblems, and the floating heads of holographic commentators speaking in 37 languages simultaneously. Jace stood beside Virella on the circular lift that rose from beneath the arena floor, adjusting his new armor, which he'd been told was Velari lightweight alloy with adaptive shielding, and which he suspected was just a fancier way of saying, still lets you feel pain. "You ready?" he asked, popping his neck. Virella didn't answer right away. Then, "Do not die. It would be inconvenient." "That's probably the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." The lift locked into place with a solid clunk. A hush fell. The announcer's voice boomed. "On this side, General Virella of the Violari Dominion, warborn and undefeated, and her chosen second, human designation Jace Deveron, survivor of Kelvar 9. Survivor, that's a great title. Super heroic. Makes me sound like I escaped a reality show," Jace muttered. "And on the opposing side," the voice continued, 7 challengers drawn from the galaxy's elite warrior houses, enhanced by cybernetic augmentation and trained in zero-G adaptive combat. From the opposite lift, the enemies rose. Tall, gleaming, expressionless. Their armor was dark chrome, etched with glowing veins of red light. Their movements were synchronized. Creepy, unnatural. The kind of precision that made Jace itch. "You take the ones on the left," Varela said. "Sure. I always wanted to get curb-stomped by identical murderbots." The chime rang. The fight began. Everything blurred. Varela moved like poetry, read in reverse. Beautiful, jarring, impossible to follow. Her twin blades arced through the air, slicing with silent efficiency. Jace, meanwhile, dodged a blow meant to liquefy his lungs and responded with a right hook that dented a helmet and broke his knuckles. "Gah, worth it!" He rolled, ducked, jabbed a shock baton into one enemy's exposed junction and yelled, "That's what I call debugging." Varela didn't laugh, but she definitely fought a little closer to him after that. One of the enemy warriors launched at Jace, blade drawn. Jace caught the blade between 2 armored bracers and head-butted the attacker so hard that sparks flew. "Human skulls," he wheezed. "Nature's finest blunt weapon." Then the twist came. One of the opponents disengaged from the formation. They moved erratically, too fast. Not just enhanced, something else. Their body shimmered. Their hand dropped. A hidden blade unfolded. They weren't a competitor. They were an assassin. Jace saw it before Varela did. He moved. The blade meant for her side went into his. Pain bloomed, blinding, cold. Varela turned with a shout, her voice raw, not military, not noble, just real. Jace crumpled. Varela moved like a singularity collapsing. The assassin didn't stand a chance. And then the match ended. The floor lit gold. The crowd erupted. But Varela knelt beside Jace, pressing one hand against his wound. "Stupid," she said softly. "Stupid man." He smiled, weak. "You always say the nicest things when I'm bleeding." She pressed her palm to his forehead, closing her eyes. "You are not allowed to die." "Not planning on it," he croaked. "Still haven't tried that space pizza you keep bragging about." And then he blacked out. The medbay aboard the Sovereign Light smelled like disinfectant and victory. Jace Devrin lay half upright in a zero-pressure bed, wrapped in a cocoon of smart fabric that tightened or loosened depending on how loudly he complained. Currently, it was squeezing him with the affectionate grip of a bear who had just read a manual on hugs. "I'm fine," he said for the 5th time. "It was just a flesh wound." "You lost 2 liters of blood," the med drone responded flatly, "and you attempted to bite the surgical assistant." "I was delirious. I thought it was offering me a sandwich." General Varela stood nearby, arms folded, her expression as blank as a black hole's resume. Her armor had been exchanged for something simpler. Formal robes with the Dominion crest glowing faintly at the collar. She didn't speak right away. "So," Jace said, shifting slightly, "did we win? Or did I get stabbed just for the cardio?" "The exhibition was a success," she replied. "Your act of interception has been labeled an expression of primitive loyalty." The aristocrats found it charming. "Great. I almost died, but at least it boosted our Yelp reviews." The assassin was traced to a rogue faction of the Vassary Concordant. The attempt has escalated political tensions across 3 sectors. "So I accidentally kicked off an interstellar incident? I'm really hitting milestones here." She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "You saved my life. I also ruined my favorite ribs, so we'll call it even." Varela paused, then extended a small object, a metal encased in a grav field. Jace reached for it, but the field shocked his fingertips. "Ah, it bites." "It's keyed to your DNA. You must accept it formally." He cleared his throat and sat up straighter, ignoring the sharp protest of his side. "I, Jace Deveron, survivor of really stupid choices and stabbing incidents, accept this shiny alien token of probably not death." The field disengaged. The metal dropped into his palm. It was warm. It pulsed. "You are now considered a citizen ally of the Violary Dominion, with privileges." "Does that include snacks?" "It includes property, transport, diplomatic immunity, and the option to refuse future arena conscription." "That's a yes to snacks, then." She didn't smile, but her ears flicked. Progress. Later, after the med team reluctantly released him, he keeps asking for a helmet that plays music, one nurse complained. Jace was escorted to Varella's private quarters. This time he walked unaided. You didn't have to bring me here, he said as the doors sealed behind him. I did, she replied. You're part of the plan now. That's either very sweet or very ominous. She turned away and poured 2 glasses of a drink that shimmered with internal light. You change things, she said. Is that your subtle way of saying I'm an inconvenience wrapped in sarcasm? You made me laugh, she said. Twice. No one's done that since the siege of Null Prime. Was that before or after you leveled the mountain range? During. He accepted the drink and raised it. To mountains and mildly acceptable company. They drank. He set the glass down. So what happens now? I remain general. You remain unpredictable. And the Dominion Council has decided your presence is beneficial. They want to make you an emissary. Wait, I get to wear robes and say things like, by the authority of the Galactic Coalition? Yes and no. You'll also be expected to attend formal functions, eat questionable cuisine, and not insult entire species in one sentence. I make no promises, but I do appreciate the offer. Varela stepped closer. You asked me once if I really said I wanted you as my husband. I did. You said it was a joke. It was, she said. Then, he blinked. I don't know if that's a threat or a marriage proposal. Neither, she said. Just information. She stepped past him, paused at the door. I've arranged a tour for you, a personal ship. Crew. It departs in 2 days. You're kicking me out? I'm giving you space. Literally. Travel. Learn. Represent us. And come back, if you want to. He stood there, holding the medal in one hand, drink in the other, armor half-fastened and heart somehow heavier than when he'd left Earth. Varela, she turned. If I come back, he said, I want real answers. Not just war stories and sarcastic flirting. She nodded. Then earn them. 2 days later, the ship Dissonant Valor lifted off from Dominion space, a sleek vessel piloted by a sarcastic AI with a questionable accent and a chef who considered fire a seasoning. Jace Devron, now Ambassador Devron, leaned back in the captain's chair, metal pinned to his collar, grin on his face. All right, Valor, he said. Let's see if the stars are ready for me. The stars weren't, but they were about to be.